Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So it is time for my June wrap up. I know I haven't uploaded anything in a hot couple minutes, but I was really just making you want it and wanting, you have to wait for it. And you did because you're here. So what did I read in June? Let's just dive right in. I finished 11 books in June, which was a total of 3,697 pages. That was 7 audiobooks, 2 physical books, and 2 digital ebooks slash a digital manga. And my overall average rating was a 3.6 stars, which is pretty good for me. So what did I read in June? The first book that I finished in June was Shadow's Claim by Kresley. This is the 12th book in the Immortals After Dark series, which I have been working my way through. This book actually sort of took a different direction, had a different tone than a lot of the other books that I've read so far in the series. We have Trehan. He is a vampire. He's very old and he's very in control of himself and his feelings, and he's very like strongly logical, and that just is not the kind of character we've seen. He's definitely still an alpha male, but he is so in control and just brings this whole different vibe than a lot of the other main male characters and we've seen in the series. So we have vampire Trehan, who realizes that his fated bride is a princess who's part sorceress, part demon. Her name is Bettina, and she is young, and because she's a princess, there's this competition that her guardians have put in place that whoever wins the competition will be winning her hand in marriage and also be ruler of this kingdom. So he kind of has to, they both take this book to figure out what they want and figure out what love is. And I really liked it. The amount of restraint and control that was expressed throughout this book was great, and it felt like a nice break from the rest of the pacing of the rest of the series. I also really felt that it was interesting that Bettina has some sort of previous trauma that she is working on overcoming and working her way through to, to a better place. And I thought that it was really well handled. Not that I'm a psychologist or anything, but I really just felt like that Trehan was the best part for me in this book, and I felt like he just was so different, especially following after Lothair, because Lothair is just like so crazy that Trehan just felt like a kind of breath of fresh air. So I really enjoyed this book and gave it 4 stars. The second book that I finished in June, not May, in June, was Barbarian Lover by Dixon. This is the 3rd book in the Ice Planet Barbarians series. We follow Kira and Ehako. The setup has already been done in book 1 and book 2. We jump right in with these characters, and I feel like if this was the first book you picked up in the series, you might be kind of confused as to a little bit of the backstory. But we have Kira, who's very solemn, and she is sort of more like a little bit more reserved and quiet, which I thought was an interesting heroine choice. And then Ehako is just like that laid back cool guy who is always trying to like make people laugh and cheer people up. And so I thought they were a good dynamic, and I was really enjoying this book. Kira kind of still has a lot of action and agency in this book that I thought was fun. Felt like that part was kind of wrapped up like a little too conveniently, but whatever, it's fine. My biggest frustration with this book, it was definitely on its way to a solid 4 stars, maybe even 4.5 stars. But what really docked it a whole full star for me was that there was these elements of infertility and what Kira could or could not bring to the table, like sort of from her own perspective. My biggest frustration with this book, though, had to do with infertility issues and how I felt that was handled. I thought that it was handled really well up until a certain point, and then I felt like that was just kind of undoing all the work of the book. So know that there are that kind of content warnings if that is something that you need, but for me, that docked it a star down to 3 stars. The 3rd book that I finished in June was Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. I have read this book before and loved it in 2017-ish, and I gave it 5 stars then. This time I listened to the audio, and I still am giving it 5 stars, but I don't think the audiobook was quite worth 5 stars. I feel like this is a book that really you need to take time and savor and like kind of work your way through. And so I would recommend, for me, it would work better in a like reading with my eyeballs instead of with my ears. But Gilead is a story of a man who is 75-ish, and he knows he is ill and he doesn't have that much longer to live. And so the whole book is him writing a journal slash letter slash like, he knows he's dying, so he's writing this really long form letter to his son because he has a very young son who's only 6 or 7, and it's really beautiful. The main character, he was a pastor, so there are a lot of theological elements and sort of wisdom of the age because he, you know, has lived a hard life, and also musings just on humanity and what it means to reach this age and what it means to find love at like an older age and to have a young child at this age, and what it's a really beautiful story. I really loved all these musings and I really like the writing, and so for me Gilead is an amazing book, and I still gave it 5 stars this time too. The 4th book I finished in June was Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne. This book I did not really enjoy. I had started it, I think on audio actually, and got about 35% of the way through in April, and then I just kind of put it down, walked away, did not care, finally got back to it, finished it pretty much all in one sitting. I had the physical book, I just plowed right through, and for me it just didn't really work. We have Ruthie and Teddy. Ruthie is this very like kind of uptight, by the book, rigid woman who is old beyond her years. She's only 25, and yet she just is living this life as if she's like an old lady, and she is working at this retirement facility, and the CEO or the business that owns a retirement facility, that guy sends his son, who is this tattooed, long hair, motorcycle riding, free spirit kind of guy, Teddy, to kind of come work here. And Teddy has a history of kind of being a screw up, and so this is a very much so opposites attract situation. But I didn't really care about either Ruthie or Teddy, and I felt like they were really an unlikely pair together. I didn't buy that the opposites really, I bought the like attraction part. I just didn't see how the two of them would work. It really felt like the author worked so hard to show how they wouldn't be good together that then I was on board. I didn't think that they would be good together. So to me, it just didn't really work. And the weakest part of this book was the romance and the relationship. And that's a bummer when it's a romance book. So for me, I just gave this book a very middle of the road, 2.5 stars. I think it could appeal to some people, but I don't know. I thought it was kind of predictable. And also it's just not my vibe. The next book that I finished in June was MacRieve by Kresley. This is the 13th book in the Immortals After Dark series. We follow William MacRieve and Chloe, and this book we kind of go back to a sort of similar tone as a lot of the other series. I really liked the elements that were happening here because, I mean, it starts off in the prologue, MacRieve, it shows trauma that he's going through, and he has a bad history with a succubus, and then it turns out many years later, with the bulk of this book, like Chloe is a succubus and she is his fated mate, and so he has to kind of overcome the traumas of his past, and Chloe has to figure out her transition into this like new creature that she didn't even know was going to be a thing in her life. And for me, I really was rooting for MacRieve. I was really rooting for their relationship. I felt like there was a lot to root for in this book. And Chloe was awesome. Chloe is sort of this like soccer playing tomboy kind of girl who's like spunky, and she doesn't put up with any shit, but she's also like got this like very soft, warm center. And so I really enjoyed her voice, and I understood that like MacRieve had a lot to overcome and like a lot of the stuff that he was going through, but also he was really he was shitty to Chloe, and to me there wasn't quite enough grovel and overcoming and like working through that. He just kind of learns one or two things and then he's like, well, I changed my whole life and got rid of centuries of, of prejudice against succubi. And I was just kind of like, okay. So I like the book a lot. I think Chloe really saved the book for me. I ended up giving it like a 3-star, but it's not my favorite of the Immortals After Dark series. The next book that I finished was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I read this for a real life book club. I'm in a cool book club with a lot of awesome ladies, and historically we have read comics, but we finally had our first meeting back together, and we read Mexican Gothic. So I heard about this on BookTube a while ago, very like thriller atmospheric. And basically we have Noemi as our main character. This book takes place in Mexico, and she is sent by her family to kind of figure out what's going on when her cousin is like writing these weird letters and saying it's like stuff's happening with this house that her cousin now lives in. So she goes there, she kind of gets sucked into this house and her, family, and this family that her cousin is married into. And it was just kind of weird. Also, I just didn't really, I think I went into it with really high expectations because I felt like I'd heard a lot of praise last year on BookTube for this. But I was really underwhelmed, and I was actually kind of bored for especially the first 60% or so of the book. I felt like there were a lot of like red herrings, and there were certain elements that were really predictable. I was expecting it to be a stronger like thriller, and also to have like supernatural, ghostly, kind of elements to this, and there was a little bit of that, I guess, but it was definitely like a left turn into, I would say, sci-fi, which was like cool but also weird. And so I don't know, for me, we had a really good discussion at my book club. I didn't feel like the like romance elements that were sort of in the book were strong. I just was kind of a okay book. I wasn't really thrilled. I spent, like I said, the first big chunk kind of bored actually. So I ultimately ended up rating Mexican Gothic 2.5. I think it probably warrants a 3-star, but it just really wasn't my jam. The next book that I finished in June was Dick Fight Island, Volume 1 by Reibun. This was a manga that was sent to me by my friends after we all were talking about it on a live show. I know that Shay from Shay Geeks Out and Izzy from Happy For Now have read this, and Tamika from Library of Tomes have all read this. They all said it was a wild ride, and I was like, I'm sorry, what is the premise? Because the premise is it's a competition for control over this island, but it's like the person who wins could become, can rule the islands, could become king, and the person who wins the competition is the one who finishes last. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? So Tamika was kind enough to actually send me the digital manga of this book, and so I read it, and I just was kind of like, what am I reading here? I don't have enough manga experience. I don't have enough experience with this like genre, I guess, or whatever this was. I've never read anything like it. So it's definitely very sexy and steamy and silly and kind of weird, but also it has this weird like innocent, sweet, wholesome like tone, even though there is like graphic images. Like I could not even show you a page of this manga if I tried to, because it's just like that, not safe for work. I don't know how to rate it. I would consider reading volume 2. It just was unlike anything else I'd ever read before, and it was banana pants, as Izzy would say. The next book that I finished in June was Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. This is the third book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which I had started a reread of this series earlier this year, kind of took a couple months off, and finally finished this third book. We dive back into Karu and Akiva's story. This third book is all about like this revolution that they're trying to start, and getting both sides these small factions of both sides to kind of work together in the hopes of actually changing things and starting this revolution. And there's also like these angels have invaded Earth, so it's kind of like the end of the world. But there's also a lot of other plot lines that are happening in this book that we find out more about the Stellians, who are like Akiva's people. and who have been mentioned in other books, but like they suddenly play a big role in this book. We find out a lot more about the history of the world, the history of the worlds, the history of angels. And there's another main character who is Eliza, who's brought into this book for the first time. And I think all of it was great, but like it really felt like it was kind of coming out of nowhere. I wish we'd had a little more layered in from the previous books. Like, yes, we knew who some of the main characters were, but not Eliza. And we had heard of the Stellians, but they hadn't played much of a role. I like this book. I think that there are a lot of really cool elements. Don't think it was done amazingly well. This is a reread. A lot of the cool elements that I was trying to remember were ones I remembered well, and all the boring stuff was stuff that I didn't remember. So it kind of turned out the way I thought it did. And to me, this is a 3.5 stars. The 9th book that I finished in June is It Takes Two to Tumble by Sebastian. This is the first book in the Seducing the Sedgwick series. This is a historical romance. It is a queer love story between Ben Sedgwick, Benedict, who is the vicar, and a naval sea captain, Captain Philip. Ben has been like kind of caring for Philip's kids while he is at sea just here in the last little bit, because the kids are kind of running wild ever since their mom died. Philip comes home and he doesn't know his children, and like he doesn't really know how to be a dad, and he's kind of freaked out. He's good at being a ship captain, and that's what he wants to get back to, but they end up falling in love. I read the 3rd book in Seducing the Sedgwick series by Sebastian last year, and it was one of my top contenders of the year. It was one I really, really loved. We follow Ben's brother and actually a guy named Martin who is in this book. Actually, I felt like Martin kind of got like not a fair shake in this book, because he's presented as kind of a jerk. I mean, he's redeemed, but he's kind of a jerk in this book. And I was like, but Martin's great because I read the third book first. I really liked these. The Ben and Philip were opposites attract. Ben was definitely like a cinnamon roll sweet guy. Philip, I warmed up to him over the book, but I really felt like we meet Ben at the start and I really like him. And then it just took me a while to warm up to Philip. I really liked the internal conflict that both of them are going through. I liked that there were kids, but Philip's children were not, they were like important, but they weren't caricatures of children in my opinion. Overall, I thought the whole book was like really cute and really sweet, and it had a good discussion of being emotionally vulnerable with the two main characters. My biggest pet peeve is the whole thing takes place in like less than 4 weeks, and I just really wanted a smidgen more like time between the two of them. It just felt like they were kind of like instantly attracted, and then they were like, oh god, I'm falling for this guy, and I just wanted a little bit more development before they both were realizing that they were like officially falling for and in love with each other. But I did really like this, and it makes me want to read the second book, as I knew I would like Sebastian, so I still gave It Takes Two to Tumble 4 stars. Okay, second to last book that I finished in June. The 10th book I've read was The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by the author. In this book, we follow Michael, sort of a little bit of his like kind of whole life, but most of the book focuses on his high school and university years. And he is trying to just figure out who he is and his own identity, and sort of embracing that and being comfortable in his own skin. And one of the things that he is starting to explore in university is drag, and how that sort of helps him figure out what he's all about. There's also a strong element of poetry in this book, and Michael is writing verse, and I really like that element. It was a very short audiobook, and I liked to hear an author do his own narration, because you can hear the intended inflections and meanings behind the words. I really liked Michael's story. There were a lot of really great quotes. I really liked the poetry element. I do wish that the drag aspect had been a little bit further explored. I felt like it was something that Michael, or by the time he gets to college, he's kind of going by Mike or Mikey. He keeps talking about how he like feels really good doing drag, and how it like feels so right. And there are these moments of like reflection and like quiet where he's doing a lot of character reflection, but like I didn't feel that that was expanded upon very much. He just kind of had a big dramatic drag show moment kind of at the end of the book, and then we're just left there. And so it was definitely intriguing. I thought it was a cool element, but I just wanted a smidgen more out of that. And it definitely intrigued me I want to do more research on like all the people that were inspiration to Mikey, and to learn a little bit more about drag and drag like history. But yeah, I really like this book, and I'm intrigued enough to want to read more by this author. So I gave The Black Flamingo 4 stars. And the last book that I finished in June was a graphic novel, Check Please, Book 1, #hockey by Ngozi Ukazu. And I really like this one. I had it checked out from the library a while ago, hadn't gotten around to it, and finally, I thought, Pride Month, time to read a queer book. And we follow Eric Biddy. Biddy is his like nickname. And he has just started his freshman year of college, and he bakes, and he was an ice dancer and also played hockey, and he's on his college hockey team, and he's going to school. And so the whole book is his first 2 years, freshman and sophomore year in college, and he is vlogging the premise is he's vlogging to you, and you are his audience, which I thought was a really cool touch. And so we do get to see a little bit of his mom, and there's frequent mentions of all of his baking, but like the main focus of this book is his team and how he is playing hockey, and how he and his team meet and become friends and work together. And in particular, Biddy has a kind of a crush on his team captain, Jack, and eventually maybe there's something there. And yeah, and I thought it was adorable. I really like the art style. I thought that there was really good emphasis on the like college atmosphere, and the friendship was like really clear. There was like in-jokes and banter, and yet like sweet moments. And so it was sometimes very bro-ish and like frat guy, but also sometimes it was just really like, the guys were all there for each other, and I thought that element was awesome. And I thought that Eric Biddy was just so cute. He is definitely a cinnamon roll. He is just this like sweet George, like he's this from Georgia, so he's just a sweet Southern boy who's just constantly baking pies for all of his friends, and he's just like, I'm gonna be tough and haze you, and here, take a sweater, I know it's cold. And I'm just like, oh my god, you're so cute. So I would totally recommend reading Check Please. And also I have the sequel of volume 2, which I've had up there for like 3 months. But I definitely want to dive straight into that because the art is great and the story is great, and we end volume 1 at a great spot, so I cannot wait to dive into the next part. So yeah, I feel like I had a little bit of a slump in the middle of the month where I just kind of read a couple, my strongest books were at the start and at the end of the month, and I have so many books checked out right now for July. I'm really excited to dive into July. And so, yeah, I think I had a pretty good month of June. If you have read any of the books that I talked about here, leave that down in the comments and tell me what your favorite read of June was, because I would love to hear about that in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. It's a epistolary. And I thought that was really interesting. And my frustration, this is kind of a spoiler for the book, so if you don't want to hear the spoiler for this book, just jump ahead 10 seconds. But basically, Kira is worried that she is infertile and will never be able to have a baby, and then Ahako reassures her that she is still valued as a person and as part of the tribe, and then they kind of agree to be together regardless of the fact that there's no resonance, and it's like a beautiful, yes, they're going to love each other even if, they decide that their love is going to be strong enough regardless of whether or not there will ever be children. And then magically the Kui thing just heals her and suddenly she's fertile anyway. I just felt like it set up all this, did a lot of work regarding this infertility and her value as a member of the tribe, and then just kind of, it felt a little bit like that all just got canceled out as soon as she resonated with Ahako.